Hello, it is another Sunday, and don't forget, even though work starts on Monday, the week starts on Sunday. So take a bit of time to lay out your week. Someone sent me a message last week to ask that I talk about how to overcome repression and deal with emotions, and that ties with what I had planned to talk about this week, which is reasoning with emotions. Some years back, I was fighting the battle for my marriage, to save my marriage. And some of the things that were very common in the marriage at that point were things like silent treatment, gaslighting, manipulating me by suggesting things that, that questioned my reality, like asking me questions like, do you think you're really smart? How did you even come about getting this grade in school, and things like that? A lot of mental, emotional, and psychological abuse, as well as verbal and physical abuse. And so I cried a lot at that point. I used to cry at night a lot. I'd go to him to ask what I could do to turn around the events in our marriage, and I always met a stone wall. So I remember one of the days I decided, you know what, I'm not going to cry about this matter again. I'm not even going to think about it anymore. And some of the things I heard a lot at that period were things like, oh, that's the lot of women. Every woman suffers that. That's the way men are. And the only way women cope is by being patient. You have to wear patience as a cloak. You have to find a way to go around it. You have to keep quiet. You have to be patient. You have to all that. And so I decided I was going to find another, outlet and shut that thought, hoping that was going to take the pain away. So I chose music. So every afternoon when my children came back from school, I'd turn up, some music, and we would dance and laugh and play. But you know what happened? The pain didn't go away. It actually became physical. It felt like someone was literally cutting my heart in pieces. And I remember then a lot of times people would ask me, Ifeoma, are you okay? You've become so lean and black. What's going on? In fact, I think that he took pity on me, and at some point he bought me this cream in a blue bottle. I don't remember the name, but I think it had either lightening or whitening on it. And I had made up my mind, a long time ago, way back in undergraduate days, that I wasn't going to put anything that had toning, lightening, or whitening written on it on my skin. But I thought, okay, maybe he doesn't love me anymore because I have become so ugly. So, I used that cream, I brightened up, but nothing changed. I was so lucky. Someday I was cleaning the house, and, I came across this book I had bought in 2009, Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer. And I turned in the middle of it, and I saw a psychological concept I had learned about maybe in second or third year, about the ego, and the superego, the three people who live in your head, and how you have to constantly have a conversation with the three people. And I sat down to have that conversation with myself. I needed to know exactly what was contributing to the pain in my heart, and I had to face the fact that I was dealing with a lot of sadness, anger, and fears. What was I afraid of? I needed to, from the directions, I needed to write down what I was afraid of. I was afraid of losing my marriage. I was afraid of what people would say. I was afraid of how people would perceive me as a Christian girl from a Christian home with a broken marriage. I was afraid of what would become of my children if they didn't grow up in, quote unquote, an unbroken marriage. And then I started to look at what the triggers were. I needed to sort out the triggers, what was causing these 4 emotions I was dealing with: the sadness, the anger, the fear, the 3 emotions that I was dealing with. So I wrote out what the triggers were, and then I looked at those triggers critically. Were these things real or imagined, events? Some of them were real events, some actual, issues in the marriage, communication issues, sex life, financial issues, respect issues and things like that. Some of them were imagined, like me always thinking that he was seeing another woman, and then I wasn't, anymore appealing to him. I wasn't sure of that. I had no proofs about that at that time. And then I needed to look at what were the things that were within my circle of control and outside of my circle of control. Well, like things like always being positive, smiling, greeting, doing what my responsibilities were within the marriage, were things within my circle of control. But whether he loved me back, smiled at me, responded when I greeted, were not things that were within my circle of control. And so I needed to pour my energies into the things within my circle of control, and I started to do that. It took quite a while, about a year or more, but I remember one evening very vividly. He came back from work and I greeted him, and I guess the tone of my voice and my body language was completely different, because some of the things I did when I was repressing emotion was acting like I didn't care, but I cared so much, and then he turned around and and he looked at me like, what's going on here? And then he moved on. A few days down the line, he called me and asked that we had a conversation, something I tried so hard to get in the days when I was wallowing in emotions, and it wasn't happening. But the most important thing that I learned from that event was that conversation was completely different from some other conversations that we used to have, where I would agree to just about anything just to have peace. It wasn't the fearful me, it wasn't the angry me, it wasn't the sad me, it wasn't the heartbroken me. I was still very expectant and hopeful for better days to come. But I approached that conversation knowing what I wanted clearly, things that were acceptable to me and things that were not acceptable to me. And that turned around a whole lot of things in my perspective about things in life and brought about my healing. So until I see you next time, be well and live your best life.